Hello everyone, this is Stren from ExtremeRigs.net, and today we have a video review for you of a dual bay reservoir. This one is from Koolance. Ta-da! And this is a dual bay reservoir that also features the ability to mount two pumps. Now not only is it a dual bay reservoir, it is a dual reservoir also. So that's right, in two 5¼ inch bays you can have two reservoirs and two pumps, meaning you can completely drive two separate loops with this if you so want. So first off, why would you want something like this when you could set up cylinder reservoirs with pumps separately? And the short answer is because you don't have space. If you're running two loops, it's actually very hard to fit two large reservoirs into most cases. There are exceptions to that, of course. So this is really a compromise. I'm short on space. I have these 5¼ inch bays, which are generally these days are not even used for anything except for maybe a fan controller, maybe an optical drive if you're feeling quite retro. So let's go ahead, open it up, and we'll see what we've got. Obviously I have opened this up before because I've already done the test work on it, but I packaged it up so you can kind of see what you get in the package. Inside you get some instructions. Little folded booklet there, and that tells you how to reconfigure the reservoir for many different situations. And the nice thing about this reservoir is that you can use it in so many different ways. It's truly the most versatile reservoir that there is. You also get a little acrylic block. We'll talk about that a bit later. We get a U-piece, a little tube there, and some screws to mount it to your case. And lastly, of course, we have the reservoir itself in a nice little plastic bag. Now, as you can kind of see here, I'm trying to angle the light so you can see better, there we go. You can see there is a metal faceplate on here, and there are two windows. Each of the windows can be a separate reservoir, or you can remove a plug that's hidden under this metal plate here, and then that enables the reservoirs to be connected so you can have one large reservoir. On the back here we have two spaces for pumps. These are for D5 pumps. Now everything you need is included here except for the pump bodies. The nice thing is because you have O-rings, and these are not the standard Lang O-rings, it means that you can buy just what's called the bare D5. In other words, it's a cheaper version of the D5 that doesn't come with the standard Lang top. So you get cost savings based on that. You can also see there are some little stop fittings, which are really hard to see, but there's two on the front and two on the top. So those, basically you have two little plug fittings for each side of the reservoir. So let's talk about how you can set this up. As it comes by default, you'll see there is a blank inserted in here. It is really hard to see in this light. There you go, just like that. Okay, now you can see there's a blank in this one, and this guy is open. Because of course you want to fit at least one pump. So you can use this just to mount one D5. If you do, this other pump area is closed off. So the first obvious case, therefore, is to use this as one pump for one loop. Obviously, the next case would be two pumps with two loops. And you could do that with a shared reservoir, or you can do independent reservoirs. And there's reasons to do both. Shared means that one loop effectively can cool the other loop. However, if they're independent, it means that you have easier maintenance. It's easier to fill and drain the system. You know, there's no interaction there. And the last option would be to run dual pumps on one loop. And in that case, you can set up the pumps in series or in parallel. Now, series is always better. You gain the redundancy on both systems, of course, but with parallel, the two pumps don't add together linearly. With series, they do. With series, what you do is one pump output goes straight into the input of the next pump. And so the pressure from each pump adds together, and you pretty much get the entire pump pressure of both pumps added perfectly linearly together. So that is the better way to do it. So who is it who's going to be using this? Well, like I said, although you can use it for so many different types of setup, the main use cases are really going to be for those who just want a single pump for now and want to upgrade. After all, there are cheaper options if you don't want to ever upgrade. If you just want a single D5 in a twin bay reservoir, there's many options and they're cheaper. So this is for the person who down the road or currently really wants to mount two pumps, and either they want two loops or they want two pumps on one loop. Either way is fine. So let's talk a bit more about the construction here. You know, a lot of the old style dual bay reservoirs used to be made out of glued acrylic. This is nothing like those old style ones. This, if you can see here, this is a single piece of acetal. Acetal is a type of black plastic here. Well, it doesn't have to be black. But it's one single lump that's been really heavily machined on almost every single side. Obviously you have the pump volutes on the lower back. You have the ports here, two for each pump. And then on the base you have this area that's being covered with stainless steel plates, and that allows for the flow routing into the pumps. On the side you have routing in case you want to add LEDs. There's some little holes here for the LEDs. There's stop fittings that have been put in, so that's been machined through there. And then each chamber of the reservoir itself is machined back into the acetal. And this costs money. It's effectively wasteful. So why do Koolance do it? Well, the answer is simple. It's better. The quality as a result is better. There's no joints, there's no glue. It's one solid lump that's been carved out to ridiculous degrees of perfection. It's a really nice, really quality, high quality piece of machining that Koolance has done. And so we really like that. Like I mentioned, it has two fill ports on either side, and that's really useful. The reason why we like two fill ports is because the air can go in one or go out of one and the water can go in the other. So when you're filling the loop, it's easier for the air to escape or bleed out. And that's great, because otherwise water has a tendency, as you're filling it in, if you fill it just a little bit too fast, it'll clog the small hole that it's trying to go through. And then it'll kind of form a seal, and the water will be trying to push up, and the water will be trying to push down, and basically you've got to burp the air out of there. And if you've got a lot of water above that air bubble that's trying to get out, sometimes that water then splashes everywhere and it's a pain in the ass. So the fact that there are two on the front is also very useful, because it means, you know, you don't have to pull the reservoir out of the case to fill it. In fact, the easiest way to fill this is to put the case on its back. So if you have this mounted in the front of the case, you put the case on the back, and then these ports are up. And you can see all the water is going to be in this main reservoir body chamber, and it's going to go to the pumps down here, which is exactly what you want. So these are really good, and not every manufacturer has these. Now, if you are running dual pumps, I would put a bit of, sorry, not dual pumps, dual loops. I would put a bit of slack on the tube so that you can pull this out, so that you can use both of the fill ports on each reservoir. Like I said, if you're doing a joint, a single reservoir, then you can just use the ones on the front, and that's really nice. So it's a really great piece of kit. It's very well designed, it's very well machined. It's the most versatile reservoir that's basically ever been built. And it comes with everything you need to set it up for any case. So let's talk about some of the design details on here. We've talked about the fill ports, the stop plugs. Let's talk about this metal fascia too. So to the camera it just kind of looks black on here, but what it actually is a kind of brushed aluminum finish plate, and it's super thick. It's about 6 millimeters thick, which is thicker than any other metal plate that you see on a reservoir. And that really helps to distribute the pressure from these screws, because the front window, it's not glued on like some reservoirs do. This is sealed with an O-ring, so it's sealed by pressure, and that pressure is applied by screws. Now you could just screw the window directly to the main body, but then you're putting pressure on the plastic window, and you know, these acrylic windows are not very strong. So this metal plate just helps really distribute that load. It also looks quite attractive, and the beefiness of it, the bulkiness of that thick fascia really kind of gives it an aggressive look. The logo and product part are on the front, and they're nice and subtle. You know, it's not some huge bold logo on like some of the companies also do. So overall, the quality is just really impressive. The work that's gone into design this is really impressive. That's evidence that this is actually the Rev 2 model. So there's been a few versions of this, and I've actually owned and tried a few of them along the way, and this is by far the best. And when it was first announced, people were worried about the orientation of these pumps because they're upside down to the typical D5 setup. You know, typically you'd have your pump so that the water feeds in from the top. In this case, the water feeds in from the bottom. And the concern with that is that air gets trapped in there and the pump runs dry. And when a pump runs dry, it overheats and it burns out. So the reason why this is more okay than a traditional setup where you mount it like that is because Koolance designed in a feed for the pump that kind of is based on capillary action. So essentially there's these kind of air bleed covers so that the only feed to the actual pump is way down at the bottom. And this is great for two reasons. For a start, it means you're maximizing the full amount of the reservoir. In a lot of D5 reservoirs, the inlet to the pump is in the middle, and once the coolant drops below that, all of that water is useless. The pump runs dry. In this case, it's not the case. As long as the pump is primed, then the water can go all the way down until it hits the bottom of this kind of opening, and that's really good. So it just makes the whole thing much more usable. So let's talk about performance now. We're going to show some plots now, and if you don't know how to read them, then just bear with us for a little bit. But the important thing with a pump is to measure the pressure across the pump, and pressure varies depending on the flow rate. So what we're plotting is a line that shows how the pressure output of the pump varies as the flow rate changes. So we've tested that, and as you would expect, the more pressure that a pump can put out, the better we would rate that performance. So we're not going to compare this to other pumps. What we're going to do is compare it to other tops, other reservoirs with a D5. And so there's two situations to really look at. There's single pump performance and there's dual pump performance. So for single pump, what we do is we just set this up for one pump with one half of the reservoir. So we don't share the reservoir. And so that's going to be representative of either that case directly or when you're running two loops with two different reservoirs from this setup. And if we look at the results, which are on screen now, what you'll see is that the Koolance setup is in the middle of the pack. And this is compared to very good D5 tops with cylinder reservoirs, which are as high flow and high performance as it can get. So yes, this doesn't beat the top performing setup, but that's okay because, as we talked about, this is a compromise. It's not designed to be the highest performance setup. It's designed to give you a lot of functionality in a small space. However, compared to other D5 reservoirs, it's no more compromised than that, and it beats several of them in fact. Now, going on to dual pump performance, in this case we set up the reservoir for series performance. So that means one loop, 2 pumps in series, 1 shared reservoir. And in this case again, we see compared to a high flow separate top compared to a cylinder reservoir, it's not going to be quite as good as that. However, compared to other designs like this, we see that it does very well. For example, the AlphaCool performs pretty horribly, and we'll do a separate review on the AlphaCool later if you're interested in why that is. So essentially, yes, the performance is a little bit compromised, but if we actually look at the load lines of what kind of flow you would get on, say, a low restriction or a medium or high restriction type loop, the actual difference in flow is not that much. So really, if this is what you need, if you do need this setup, then you shouldn't really be worried about the slight loss in performance. So overall, this is a great piece of equipment. The Koolance reservoir does absolutely anything you could want, and it does it very well. It's still not going to be the easiest to use in terms of bleeding, because you only have a small volume of water in the reservoir. It means you have to continually fill it up as you fill up your loop. So overall, this is a great piece of equipment. It's extremely versatile. You can set it up for almost any kind of loop you might want to configure. The quality is extremely high. The performance is very high, given that this is, by its nature, a compromise. Bleeding has been improved from the older versions of the model. And if you need a dual bay reservoir with 2 D5 pumps, this is the absolute best you can get, and we do not hesitate to recommend it for that. If you're not sure about what you do need, we do think the safest and easiest thing to use is still a cylinder reservoir. So just bear that in mind if you're new. So that's all we have on this guy. Do check out the written style version of this review if you want to find out more. We go into some more of the details on the construction there. As always, like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps us. And stay tuned for more videos.